So for lesson 2, we're going to look at equation of a circle in standard form, which is a little bit different than the center radius form. Now we do know, or we can convert between the two, and that's going to be a major focus of the lesson. So the first one says to expand, aka multiply the expression, x plus 2 squared. So depending on what building you were in last year, depends on how you know how to do this. If you were in the high school, you probably did it like this. So x times x was x squared, x times 2 was 2x, x times 2 was 2x, and then 2 times 2 was 4. And then you had your like terms here, and you got x squared plus 4x plus 4. Now, if you were in the middle school last year, then you probably just did this. So you double distributed, and you got y squared minus 3y plus 9. You had your like terms in the middle, and you had that piece, y squared minus 6y plus 9. So now we want to write the equation x plus 2 squared plus y minus 3 squared equals 4 without any parentheses and set equal to 0. So this looks like our equation of a circle in center radius form, and we are going to focus on how we get basically to standard form from there. So if I work with my x plus 2, we just found that that was x squared plus 4x plus 4. All right, that's what we did in part A. Plus, we just found out that y minus 3 squared was y squared minus 6y plus 9. And then we're going to be equal to 4. So if we look, is there anything we can combine here? Well, our 4 and our 9. So we get x squared plus 4x plus y squared minus 6y plus 13 equals, and we're going to be equal to 4. Now, if we want to set it equal to 0, we'll subtract 4, and x squared plus 4x plus y squared minus 6y plus 9 equals 0. And this is very, very similar to our standard form for the equation of a circle. So standard form of the equation of a circle can be found by expanding the squares of the two binomials in center radius form. So after the two binomials have been expanded, the equation will be in the form of x squared plus y squared plus dx plus ey plus f equals 0. Now, some of this is interchangeable. As you could see, we had our x squared and our x term next to each other, our y squared and our y term next to each other. And then our constant was at the end, but it was set equal to 0. So that's what's called standard form of a circle. Now, I'm going to be perfectly honest. You need to know more how to get standard form into center radius form. So we're actually going to skip exercise 1 because I believe that you can all multiply out those parentheses, combine your like terms, and set it equal to 0. So what I want to focus on more is, well, how do we get from standard form to center radius? Because center radius, in all honesty, provides us with a lot more options for how we can solve problems, okay? And we have to go back to algebra. And you did a process in algebra called completing the square, okay? And that's what we are going to end up doing for our standard form circles. So if we walk through this a little bit, we're going to write the equation in center radius form. So this is x squared plus y squared plus 2x minus 4y plus 1 equals 0. So the first thing we want to do is we want to rewrite it so that the x and the y terms are separated, and we want to leave a space for each of these values. Now I like to add something here. So notice we put the x squared and the 2x next to each other, then we put plus a line. We put the y squared and the minus 4y, and we put plus a line. And we also subtracted that negative 1 over, or that 1 over to the other side. But now I always like to match. If I have 2 lines on the left, I like to have 2 lines on the right. Step 2, add the value of b over 2 squared to complete the square for each function. Now, what is b? B is the number next to x or y. So in this case, for the x's, it's going to be a 2. For the y, it's going to be a negative 4. All right. So as we do that, notice the first line was 2 over 2 squared. The first line on the right-hand side was 2 over 2 squared. The second line was negative 4 over 2 squared. And the second line on the right-hand side was negative 4 over 2 squared. So that's why I like to have 2 lines on the left and 2 lines on the right so that they can match. All right, so let's take a look at this. 2 divided by 2 is 1. 1 squared is 1. And I like to wrap all my stuff having to do with x's in a parenthesis. Negative 4 divided by 2 is negative 2. Negative 2 squared is 4. So there's our plus 4. And you'll notice we have a plus 1 and a plus 4 on the other side. So what you're going to do is you're going to end up factoring each of those parentheses. So you're going to factor the x part, you're going to factor the y part. And the whole purpose of this is that when you factor it, you end up getting the same parenthesis twice. So x squared plus 2x plus 1 is x plus 1, or in other words, x plus 1 squared. Y squared minus 4y plus 4 is y minus 2, or in other words, y minus 2 squared. And then if you look here, negative 1 plus 4 gives us 4. And now we have ourselves the equation of a circle in center radius form. We know our center has the opposite sign, so the center is negative 1, positive 2, and the radius is the square root of that number it is equal to, and the square root of 4 is 2. All right, so that's how we're going to use completing the square. Now, this is fairly detailed. It might be written a little bit different than how you prefer it. So I'm going to show you how I'm going to do all of these problems. All right, so determine the center and the radius in simplest radical form for each question in standard form. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to take a minute here to rearrange. So the first thing I want to do is I want to add the 6 over to the other side. Okay. At the same point, I'm going to put my x squared, my negative 6x, and my line next to each other, plus y squared plus 2y plus a line next to each other. And then we're going to be equal to, so we added 6, and then we had 2 lines on the left, so we need to have 2 lines on the right. Now I'm going to be a little bit detailed in how I do the next part, and I'll show you why in a second. So to figure out what goes on that line for the x's, I take negative 6 divided by 2 is negative 3. And then negative 3 squared is 9. So on the first line of each goes 9. First line on the right side goes 9. For the y's, the number I'm going to divide by 2 is 2. So 2 divided by 2 is positive 1. And 1 squared is 1. So the second line on each side gets a 1. Now, we could look at this as, okay, I need to factor this and factor this. But we know that it's going to work out to be the same parenthesis twice. There's a trick. So if you write all your stuff here the way I did, you can jump right to the 1 parenthesis squared part. So we know our parenthesis here is going to start with x. And how do we know what the number is? Well, what did you get when you divided by 2? I got a negative 3. So we're going to be x minus 3 squared. We know the second parenthesis is going to start with y. Well, what did I get when I divided by 2? I got a positive 1. So we're going to be y plus 1. So if you list your stuff out here and you show the dividing by 2 piece with your positive or your negative sign, that will allow you to then get all of your parentheses squared done just like that without actually having to do the factor. And then 6 plus 9 plus 1 gives us 16. So now that's going to give us a center of 3, negative 1, and a radius of the square root of 16, which is 4. So that one didn't have to stay in simplest radical form because it was a perfect square. So let's look at the next one. All right, same process. So we're going to start by subtracting that 9 over to the other side and reorganizing our terms so that they are next to each other. So as we do that, what I'd like you to do is, after you have everything listed out here, I would like you to pause the video and see if you can do the completing the square process to get your equation on your own. So for the x's, I'm going to start by, I take the negative 12 divided by 2, I get negative 6. Negative 6 squared is 36. So 36 and 36. For my y's, I'm going to be 10 divided by 2 is 5. 5 squared is 25. 25 and 25. So again, I can jump right to my 1 parenthesis squared. Because I did this and showed, I know I'm going to be x minus 6 squared plus. because I showed here I got a positive 5, I'm going to be y plus 5 squared equals, now I'm going to use my calculator for this last part to make sure I don't screw anything up. So negative 9 plus 36 plus 25 gives me 52. So that's going to give me a center of 6, negative 5, and a radius of the square root of 52. Now 52 is not perfect, but it does split. Splits into square root 4 and square root 13, gives us 2 square root 13. So that's going to be our radius, is going to be 2 square root 13. So most questions will be easier to solve when the equation of the circle is in center radius form. So that's why it's important that we know how to convert from one to the other. Now, determine the maximum y value of the circle with the equation x squared plus y squared minus 16x plus 39 equals 0. So this is an equation in standard form, but it's got a couple extra tricks to it. And we'll get to the maximum y value at the very end. The first thing is, we know we need to take our negative 39, or a 39, and subtract it over to the other side. And we're also going to put our pieces next to each other. So x squared minus 16x plus our line. Then we're going to be plus y squared. Now notice, there is no other y term. So that actually makes this process a little bit easier because we don't have to do completing the square for y. Now, how many lines do I have on the left? Since I only had to put one line on the left, I'm only going to put one line on the right. So now all I have to do is complete the square to the x's. So negative 16 divided by 2 is negative 8. Negative 8 squared is 64. So 64 and 64. All right, again, there's nothing left to do for the y's. So if I write my equation here, I'll be x minus 8 squared plus y squared equals negative 39 plus 64 is going to be 25. So let's take a look. We have a center of 8, 0, and we have a radius of the square root of 25, which is 5. So it wants to know the maximum y value. All right, so if we go over here, we know our center point is here at 8, 0, and we know we have a radius of 5. So as we go and just kind of sketch our circle, that right there is going to be our maximum y value point. So if our coordinates for the center were 8, 0, and we went up 5, what are going to be the coordinates of that maximum point? 8, 5. So therefore, our max y value is going to be 5. All the other y values that go around that circle are going to be less than that y value up top. Exercise 4. The equation of a circle is x squared plus y squared minus 6y plus 1 equals 0. What are the coordinates of the center and the length of the radius? All right, so again, we'll start by subtracting that 1 and reorganizing everything. So x squared, you'll notice x squared does not have any partners. So we go plus y squared minus 6y plus a line equals negative 1 plus a line. All right, now again, only one line per side because the x squared doesn't have to complete the square. So for the y's, negative 6 divided by 2 is negative 3. We square it to get 9. So then what do we get here? We have x squared plus y minus 3 squared equals negative 1 plus 9 is 8. So that gives us a center of 0, positive 3, and a radius of the square root of 8, which is really 2 radical 2. So what's our answer choice? Is going to be choice 1. Now you could have figured that out once you got the center, because there's only one center choice with 0, 3, but just more work with simplifying our radius. Determine the center and the radius of a circle with the equation x squared plus 16x plus y squared minus 10y equals 0. So there is no constant right away here, but we do have to complete the square to both pieces. So we'll make sure we add our lines on both sides. So you could put 0 plus a line, or you could just put line plus line. It's kind of up to you. So, forgot my x here. So we take our 16 divided by 2 is 8, and 8 squared is 64. So 64 on both sides. We take our negative 10 divided by 2 is negative 5. Square that, we get 25. 25 and 25. So we get x plus 8 squared plus y minus 5 squared equals 64, and 25 gives us 89. So that gives us a center of negative 8, positive 5. And it gives us a radius of the square root of 89, which I do not think simplifies. I will take a quick check, though, just to make sure. 89 divided by x. It appears that basically everything gives us a decimal for the most part, so I'm going to assume that there's no way to simplify that. So therefore, our radius is just going to have to stay the square root of 89. So that's how we take our standard form and turn into center radius form by completing the square.